There were days when I couldn't explain why the distance between Jared and me kept growing. It wasn't work, and it wasn't because we were busier. It felt more like a thin fog settling over everything familiar, turning things distant even when we were sitting in the same room. I felt the shift before I even realized I was trying to come up with reasons to calm myself down. That afternoon was as ordinary as any other. Light slipped through the window. Jared was watching something on his phone, and I was tidying up a few things in the kitchen. It was so quiet, I thought the day would pass without anything happening. But then he said something, simple, casual, not meant to hurt. Just an offhand comment dropped into a moment where nothing was going on. Jared said, "Talia's cuter." I froze for a moment, not shocked, more like my breath slipped out of rhythm for half a beat. Talia, my best friend for years. The one who always showed up with a bright smile, a soft voice, friendly enough that everyone felt comfortable around her. But strangely, even though I loved Talia like family, every time she walked into a room I was already standing in, something in me dipped. Just a little. Hard to name. Like some instinct trying to say something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. I always thought I was just being overly sensitive. Because Talia had never done anything wrong. Or at least, I never let myself look any closer. When I heard Jared say that, I didn't ask anything. I didn't get mad. I didn't want to turn that one line into something heavier than it was. I just stood there, looking down at my hands, reminding myself that maybe he was joking, or maybe he was just complimenting how naturally easygoing Talia was. Which was true. Talia always knew how to make people laugh, while I was quieter, more of a listener than someone who filled the room. But even as I tried to reassure myself, something in my chest went still. A small empty space opened up and just stayed there. I sat down next to Jared a few minutes later. He was still relaxed, like nothing had happened. To him, that comment probably didn't carry any weight. I kept telling myself, don't make a big deal out of it, don't take it to heart. But the more I tried to shake it off, the more I wondered why that line hit the exact spot I'd been trying to cover for so long. Jared glanced at me for a second, then went right back to his screen. It wasn't careless, just normal. But that normalness made it clear he truly didn't think what he said could make me overthink. I turned the other way, looking out the window. The late afternoon chills softened something inside me, but in a hollow sort of way. I didn't want to blame him, and I couldn't blame Talia. I just felt a small loss somewhere within myself. Talia was always the one who made everyone in the group feel at ease. She laughed easily, told stories well, made people feel seen. Maybe that kind of charm really was something she had. But for some reason, every time she placed a hand on someone's shoulder, I felt myself shrink a little. I never told anyone this, mostly because I didn't understand it myself. When Jared compared me to Talia, it wasn't jealousy. It was the sudden feeling that I was standing slightly outside a circle I'd always been part of. Like I was the only one who couldn't keep up with that lightness. And his comment only made me admit something I'd been ignoring for a while. I'd felt this shift long before, I just didn't want to face it. I asked quietly, "What do you mean by that?" Jared answered in a casual tone, "It's nothing. Sometimes you're just a bit too serious." I nodded, because I knew he wasn't trying to hurt me, and because I also knew I wouldn't get any other answer. After that moment, I stayed quiet until the sky went completely dark. Not out of anger, but because I needed to feel that cold settling in from the inside out. I asked myself, why did one simple line leave me this silent? I went to bed earlier than usual, but before I closed my eyes, I knew this wouldn't fade by morning. It felt like I had brushed against the edge of something bigger, something I'd never dared to look at directly. And that night, for the first time, I started replaying every interaction between Jared, Talia, and myself. Everything became a little clearer, like someone had just wiped the dust off a pane of glass. Nothing was dramatic, but each small detail made me realize the distance between the three of us wasn't as even as I once thought. I didn't want to doubt anyone, especially Talia, but the more I paid attention, the more I noticed something didn't quite match between her cute smile and the feeling it left in me. The next time we met, we sat together for a small dinner. Talia talked about where she'd gone over the weekend. Her voice was still light as always, full of that easy energy that made everyone laugh. But when she looked at me and said, half joking, half not, Mariah's always so calm. I bet it's hard for her to be as lively as me. I felt a small chill run down my spine. The others laughed, and so did Jared. He wasn't trying to tease me or make me uncomfortable, but that unconscious smile of his still made me shrink a little, like I wasn't sitting in the right place in that story. Talia often said things like that. Sweet tone, nothing harsh, but with an undertone that made me wonder why I was always the one placed in the less interesting spot. I didn't think she meant to put me down, but it was hard not to notice the pattern. Her words always shifted the room in a way that made people see me differently, like I was just the softer background to the energy she brought in. Another time, I happened to see Jared laughing at a message on his phone. He turned the screen toward me and said, "Talia just sent this, it's pretty funny." It was just a few jokes about something I'd told Talia the day before. Something small, but what made me pause was this. It was something only I had shared with her. Not a secret, but still part of my own personal life. I wondered why Talia repeated it to Jared, and why she thought it was something to make him laugh. I said quietly, "Oh, she told you too?" Jared answered quickly, "She probably just thought it was funny. It's nothing." I nodded, but the feeling inside me wasn't as steady as before. Not because I was jealous, but because I felt a line being erased. A line I thought everyone understood, especially a friend I'd trusted for years. In the days after that, I started paying closer attention. And when I did, I noticed Jared growing more and more at ease when talking to Talia. Not in a flirtatious way, but in the way someone lets themselves relax. I'd never seen him like that with me, at least not anymore. When Talia showed up, the air between them felt easy, quick, natural. So much so that I began to realize I was the only one who had to adjust myself to keep up. Talia often tilted her head a little, smiling softly when she talked, like she genuinely cared about the other person's answer. But when I stepped back for a moment, watching without joining in, I could see the subtle precision in the way she handled people's emotions. She gave compliments at the right moment, landed jokes exactly where they'd work, knew when to place a light touch on someone's arm to make things feel warmer. To everyone else, it was just her being cute. But to me, looking a little deeper, something about it felt calculated. That evening, in front of a few friends, Talia said something that made me go quiet for a few seconds. Mariah's so calm that she can be a bit bland sometimes, but the good thing is, she's dependable when it matters. It sounded like a compliment, but the first part had been repeated too many times lately. People chuckled, and Jared did too. His easy smile told me he'd gotten used to hearing me compared that way. I wasn't angry. I just felt like I was slowly being put into a mold I never chose. A mold Talia shaped for me with her own sweetness. Looking back, I could see the imbalance clearly. When Talia said something a bit much, everyone brushed it off as a joke, as she's just being cute. But when I stayed quiet, people thought I was being distant. Our energies no longer met in the middle. And it felt like I was the only one who noticed. All the small things started piling up in the quietest way. Every time Talia joked about how I talked less than she did, every time Jared laughed without realizing I was shrinking a little, every time a personal detail of mine was shared so casually, they were all drops falling on the same spot. At some point, I realized I no longer fully believed in Talia's cuteness. It was still pretty, still soft, still made people feel seen. But I was beginning to notice the other side. Her charm was too perfect to be effortless. It felt placed in the right spot, used at the right time, aimed at the right person. And that was when I understood something important. Talia wasn't as innocent as I thought. She was perceptive. But the kind of perceptive that had intention behind it, the kind that could shift a situation in her favor with nothing more than a soft, effortless line. That night, lying in bed, I felt the change inside my own thoughts. It wasn't hatred, and it wasn't wild suspicion. It was a quiet instinct, the kind that feels true. Maybe Talia was using her sweetness to shape how people saw me without them ever realizing it. And that's when I knew whatever I was about to uncover wouldn't be as gentle as she looked. I tried to keep just enough distance to watch everything around me. Not to look for faults, but to understand whether the uneasiness in my chest had a reason or if I was just being overly sensitive. But then one very small moment, barely anything, made all my thoughts click into place. That day I met Talia after work. She asked me to go for a walk to get some fresh air. I agreed, though I felt a bit hesitant inside. I didn't know when it started, but every time I walked next to Talia, I always felt like I needed to brace myself for whatever double-layered comment might come next. We followed the familiar street, the wind was soft, and Talia talked about everything and nothing. Her voice was still sweet, still smooth, still the kind that made people believe she genuinely cared. Then she paused for a moment and turned to me with a look that seemed worried. "Mirai, you know, Jared's the type of man who needs a woman who can set the mood. You're calm, which is good, but sometimes it's a little hard for people to feel excited around you." The words weren't sharp enough to hurt all at once. They felt more like a tiny needle touching the spot I'd been trying to hide. Talia said it gently, as if she was helping me face something I couldn't admit myself. But the look in her eyes wasn't the look of someone who cared. It was the look of someone watching my reaction, trying to see exactly where that needle landed. I smiled. "I know." Just a simple reply, but my heart skipped a beat. In that moment, I realized Talia wasn't accidental. Her comments, her harmless little comparisons, they all pointed in a direction. And it wasn't toward helping me. It was toward shaping how others saw me through the lens she chose. That afternoon passed quietly, as if nothing had happened. But when I got home, I felt something inside me crack. A thin, quiet line, but definite. That night, when Jared went into the bathroom, he left his phone on the bed. The screen lit up with a new message from Talia. I'm not the type to snoop through my partner's phone, and I didn't plan to touch it. But the notification wasn't hidden at all. "Don't take Mirai too seriously. She's used to being quiet. Let me handle the mood." I didn't open the message. I just looked at it the way someone might stand in a hallway staring into a room that doesn't belong to them. I didn't blame myself for seeing it. It appeared on its own, and the truth doesn't wait for us to be ready. When Jared came back, the screen had already gone dark. He had no idea what I'd seen. And I didn't say anything. Somehow, instead of exploding, everything inside me settled. Maybe the hurt was too clear for me to have the strength to push it away anymore. Later, when Jared fell asleep, I stepped out to the living room for some water. His laptop was still open on the table. I only meant to close it, but the moment I touched it, a chat window popped up in the corner of the screen. Messages between him and Talia. I didn't read all of it. I didn't need to. The first few lines were enough. Talia sent him soft, flattering comments. The kind of compliments that make someone feel more interesting than they really are. Jared replied in a way that sounded like he was looking for her approval, something he no longer looked for in me. In those few lines, I could see how lopsided the energy had become. Talia was always the one who made him laugh, while I was the one mentioned as too calm, hard to read, overthinking, not as fun. There was no betrayal, no confession, nothing that crossed a clear line. But the emotional closeness between them was enough to make me feel like I was standing outside a window, watching my own life from the outside. Talia wasn't just cute. She knew how to make herself the person who brought joy, and how to make me the person who seemed less interesting. I sat down on the couch, hand over my chest, trying to steady my breath, not out of jealousy, but because I could finally see the thing I'd been avoiding all this time. Talia was building her image out of the empty spaces she'd carefully created around me. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel the need to. Instead, I felt a coldness spreading from the inside out. The cold of clarity, not despair. Both Jared and Talia had fallen into the illusion of sweetness she crafted. He unconsciously leaned on her to fill the spaces I no longer tried to fill. And she knew exactly what she was doing. What hurt wasn't the truth itself, but how beautifully the truth had been wrapped. So beautiful, I hadn't wanted to see it for a long time. I looked at my reflection in the window. A woman sitting still, not breaking, just listening to her own heart. And for the first time in months, I realized I didn't want to keep everything balanced anymore. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't go to Jared to ask why. I didn't go to Talia to say, "You crossed a line." Neither of them needed to hear anything from me. They needed to see for themselves what I saw today. I stood up, closed the laptop, and walked back to the bedroom. Each step felt light, like I was leaving a room that had become too small for me. and when my hand touched the doorknob, I knew I'd just made the most important decision. I was pulling my energy out of this relationship. Not to punish anyone, but so I wouldn't keep losing myself. After the night I read those messages between Jared and Talia, something in me shifted. Not a collapse, but a quiet, deep awakening. I no longer wanted to hold on to anything. And maybe because of that, I started changing from the inside. I talked less, but every word I said was clear. I stopped trying to soften my emotions to keep the peace, stopped forcing a smile to calm Jared when he frowned over something small. I just stayed as I was, steady with myself. A quietness settled around me, but not the fragile kind I used to have. It was the quiet of someone who has seen enough. Jared noticed it before I could even put it into words. He started looking at me longer, as if he was searching for something familiar he couldn't find anymore. One evening he hesitated and asked, "Are you okay?" I just nodded. And maybe it was that calmness, not anger, not sadness, that unsettled him the most. Before, I was always the one keeping rhythm, the one who filled the empty spaces in the conversation, the one who stepped in to steady things when someone else slipped. But now, I stepped back and let the emptiness show its real shape. And when I stopped being the background, Jared finally noticed the shift in the air between us. One evening, when Talia stopped by to return something, I watched them the way an outsider watches a scene. She still carried the same familiar charm, the soft smile, the bright eyes, the way she tilted her head when she talked. She placed a hand on Jared's arm while telling a story, a gesture I never thought twice about before. But now, I could see it clearly. It wasn't as innocent as I once believed. Jared smiled at her, but this time, his eyes shifted for just a moment before turning back to me. I caught that moment, brief, barely there, but enough to know that once I stepped out of the circle, Talia's sweetness didn't shine the way she wanted it to. She shared a few funny stories, trying to create the same easy atmosphere she always did. But I didn't respond the way I used to. I wasn't cold, and I wasn't confrontational. I just watched her with the eyes of someone who finally understood who she really was. And that look alone seemed to throw her off for a second, as if she'd dropped her role without meaning to. I saw something clearly. Talia's sweetness only worked when someone else played the less noticeable role. And once I stopped being that person, everything started to show. A few days later, Jared changed. He tried talking to me more. He asked, "You haven't been smiling much lately." I answered softly, "I'm not trying to smile less or more." Such a simple line, yet I watched how it stopped him cold. Jared had been used to the version of me who always adjusted herself so things would stay smooth. But the person standing in front of him now didn't do that anymore. Then one morning, as I was getting ready for work, Jared mentioned that Talia would stop by that evening because she wanted to talk about something. I just nodded. But inside, I knew I didn't want to exist in this dynamic with the two of them anymore. Not in the way they'd shaped it. That evening, when Talia arrived, Jared seemed eager to create a light, fun atmosphere. But it didn't appear on its own the way it used to. Talia told a few jokes, but Jared only gave awkward smiles. I watched them quietly, and in that moment, I understood. I had pulled my energy out of this relationship, and the balance that once depended on my silent endurance was beginning to collapse. Talia mentioned me in a half-joking way. "Mariah's been so quiet lately. Work stressing you out?" Jared turned toward me, and his eyes softened. For some reason, I felt a pang of sympathy for him. Sympathy because he was finally starting to see what I had seen for so long. Before he had to find the words, I said, "It's not work. I just don't want to keep trying anymore." Both of them fell silent. That silence was the most complete explanation I could give. After Talia left, I stood in front of Jared. There was no anger, no tears, no asking why, no mention of the messages I'd seen. I just said, in a voice as light as a breath, "I'm not in this relationship anymore." Jared froze, like he thought he misheard. "Mariah, what do you mean?" I looked at him, calm but certain. "I'm stepping out of this relationship, not because I'm angry, but because I don't want to lose myself any further." He moved toward me, panicked in a way I'd never seen from him. "We can talk about this." I shook my head. "There's nothing left to talk about." I saw the fear in his eyes. And for the first time, I realized Jared was finally facing the consequences of all the small things he thought didn't matter. Because when I stood up and walked away, every bit of balance that depended on me fell with it. A few days later, I heard from a friend that Jared and Talia had argued. Not a big fight, but he told her he felt she was not as genuine as he once believed, something he had never noticed before. I didn't feel happy hearing it, and I didn't feel hurt. I just felt light. Talia's sweetness started to crack when I was no longer there to be the contrast. And in the space I left behind, Jared finally saw how thin the veneer around her really was. On my last night in that house, I packed my things in silence. Every step felt light, free of resentment. I wasn't punishing anyone, but my leaving forced everything to reveal its true shape. And in that empty space, Jared realized he had just lost the only person who ever loved him without needing compliments, without needing validation, without needing to be compared to anyone. After I left, Jared called me a few times. His messages were long, drifting between explanations and apologies. He said he was careless, that he didn't know things had gone that far, that if I had told him sooner, he would have changed. But I knew none of that mattered anymore. I didn't blame him, and I didn't want him drowning in guilt. I answered only what I could. I'm okay, and I'm not coming back. I think what unsettled Jared wasn't the fear of losing me right away, but the fact that he wasn't used to me being this decisive. He asked me a question I'll never forget. Can't we just start over? I only said, we've already passed the moment where that was possible. After a few days, the calls became less frequent, not because he stopped caring, but because he finally had to face the space I left behind. A quiet space, but a very real one. As for Talia, I wasn't surprised when I heard that her sweetness didn't shine the way it used to anymore. A mutual friend told me that lately, something about the way Talia talked to Jared felt different. No more softness, no more perfectly timed cuteness. Without me there as the contrast, the gestures that once seemed charming now looked a bit exposed. A smile that felt strained, comments that sounded like they were asking for attention, and eyes waiting for someone to validate her. Jared noticed it too. He never said it directly, but I knew he was finally seeing the thin layer he once believed was real. Without someone else to be compared to, Talia couldn't keep playing the role she had built for herself. She started wanting more attention, more praise, more priority. And that was exactly what made Jared pull back. A friend described a recent moment between them. Talia complained that Jared wasn't being fun anymore. She said he was too quiet, not as relaxed as he used to be. Jared replied with one small sentence that changed the whole atmosphere. I think I only felt relaxed before because Mirai kept everything balanced. I wasn't there, but I can almost picture Talia's face when she heard that, the first time she wasn't placed at the center. Jared slowly realized he had never truly wanted Talia. He had only been drawn to the glow she created, a glow that existed only because I was there, standing quietly in the background. And once I stepped out of the picture, he finally saw the real backdrop. No sweetness, no ease, no charm the way he once imagined. As for me, my new life moved slowly and peacefully, to the point that I sometimes felt like I was learning how to breathe again. Every morning, I woke up without having to hold the rhythm for anyone. I ate dinner alone but never felt lonely. I cleaned the small room I rented and realized the neatness wasn't for anyone to admire. It was just to make myself feel comfortable. No resentment, no bitterness, no need for anyone to regret anything. I just felt lighter, truer to myself. One late night, Jared sent me one last message. Not long, not desperate. Just one sentence. I never thought my own words would make me lose you like this. I stared at that line for a long time. Then I put my phone down. I didn't reply, and I didn't delete it. I just left it there like a reminder of something that had ended. Not beautiful, but necessary. And in that moment, I realized something so clear, it almost felt gentle. The person who lost the most wasn't me. It was Jared. He lost the one person who never compared him to anyone. He lost someone who loved him with a quiet steadiness he was never careful enough to protect. He saw it all too late. Only after I stepped out of the light, the shadowed space he and Talia had created without ever meaning to. As for me, I was simply finding my way back to being whole. Not to prove anything, not to get even. Just to return to the part of myself I'd abandoned while trying to hold everything together. Some endings don't need a slammed door, just a soft step forward. and that was the step I chose. Leaving wasn't about making anyone hurt. Leaving was about not letting my heart live in a place it didn't belong anymore. If it were you, if someone slowly made you disappear inside your own relationship, would you stay to explain, or would you walk away to find yourself again? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. That's the end of the story. See you next time.